how to introduce your dog to your brand new baby. So this is, quite a common thing. We see this all the time. We see it done well, done not well, these kind of things. But obviously, this is one of the things that is the utmost importance. It's really important that you get it right. And obviously, if you get it wrong, you're going to have devastating consequences for everyone involved. So I see this one quite often, and interestingly, it's usually when there's two differing opinions about how it should be done within the family, which is always difficult with dog training anyway. But it's somebody's worried and somebody's kind of overly not worried, if you like. I have got a video on TikTok of how to do this as well. So if you want to have a look at that, it's done by this Staffy, and how we dealt with it with him, because he was quite stressed about the baby, and it was being interpreted as over friendliness, but it wasn't that. He was just quite stressed, and stressed dogs are unpredictable, and that's really what you have to watch out for. So there's two schools of thought, which is one which is don't let the dog go anywhere near the baby, and the other extreme is kind of let the dog go really near the baby. But basically, what I'm here to say is that anything you introduce to your dog, whether it's a pet or a baby, your dog doesn't need to get really close to know what it is. The dog's sense of smell is tens of thousand times better than ours. They know that there's something there. The thing is, what you've got to realise about your baby, and whether your dog's been protective of you when you're pregnant, whether they've been extra caring, nurturing, that's absolutely fine. It's very unlikely that will have any correlation to how the dog sees the baby. This is where people can get a bit naive and a bit kind of Disney-like about dogs and babies and things like that. The dog is a predator. It's a predatory animal. They hunt, they kill things. They also have this thing in their brain where if something kind of squeaks, they bite down on it, which is, why they like squeaky balls. It kind of fills them with adrenaline, and it basically emulates a screaming rabbit or a dying rabbit, and you really want to bite down hard on that to kill it, and it kind of is nature's way of getting it all over with. But squeaky, screamy things interpret a dog's bite response. So, if a child is running and a dog is nipping and having fun, and then the child starts screaming, the dog's much more likely to bite him because of this thing in their brain, because they are predators. A baby, we're thinking of it as a little human, that's obviously got the status of a human, and the dog must know it's a human because I'm holding it, and it looks like us, and it's pink, and it's got no fur. But from a dog's point of view, it could just be a baby rabbit. And I mean that in all honesty, because they don't smell like us, they don't look like us, they don't act like us. What they look and act like and are is a animal, is a little animal. They have a very, very strong smell that doesn't smell human. It smells very weird, and their movements are weird. Their noises are weird, and this is all something that a dog has to cope with. So first of all, the first thing you need to get in your head is, how you would introduce your baby to the dog. In your head, you should be thinking, if I had a baby rabbit, how would I be introducing that to the dog? Would I put it on the floor with the dog? Would I let the dog put his big slobbery face into it? Probably not. And this is what you need to do with your baby. There is no reason for your dog to get that close to the baby. It does not need to see it. It does not need to smell it from 1 centimetre away. It shouldn't be going anywhere near it. In a dog society, what happens? Yes, they raise their young together, but actually the mum and the pup stay alone in a cave or underground for a good few weeks. No one's allowed in there. It's not, oh yeah, come and see it's not any of that. And if they do, whether it's the father or anyone else, they will get growled at and nipped. The mum protects the baby. So that is normal. What's not normal is just allowing your dog to come and see the baby. That's not normal. And it's potentially extremely dangerous. It doesn't matter how well you know your dog, unless your dog has already seen babies, or you could probably, it is taking a bit of a gamble, but if you've introduced your dog to a multitude of different animals, parrots, rabbits, ferrets, guinea pigs, mice, all these things, and they've been fine, you're probably going to be okay. But it's not enough just to say, oh, my dog's friendly, or my dog has seen a rabbit once and it was fine. That's not enough. dogs don't generalise, so every new situation is completely different. And you really need to think safety. If your dog, his face is next to your baby and suddenly has a change of heart, there is literally no way you would be able to respond fast enough to stop it happening at all. So don't think you can, even if it's on a lead, which I'll get into later. But there's no way you'll be able to stop it. So safety, honestly, is paramount. There's no reason for your dog to meet your baby at all at this stage for a few weeks. Even in a natural state, they wouldn't, and that's really important to understand that. I'm going to go through a few things of what might and can go wrong and has gone wrong, sadly, for other people, and what you really have to look out for, because it's very easy to make a mistake, especially with tired parents. Mistakes have been made where people have left the baby upstairs and the doors are open, or the doors left ajar, and it was a Jack Russell. It ran upstairs and killed it. And people say you need to introduce it so it knows what it is. Really, you need to introduce from a distance and have boundaries about what it is. You can't just manage the situation, because managed situations almost always go wrong at some point, as this situation did, which was extremely bad. But it's one of those things where you can't just leave a baby in a room with the door ajar and just assume, oh, the dog's never been upstairs. You have to think safety first. Think almost like when I have dogs and they're fighting in the house and they have to be separated for a time until they can be put together and be controlled. You have to almost think about if you'd have zoo animals. You wouldn't just have all the animals loose together. You would have doors. You would have double doors. So you walk through one, shut it, walk through another, shut it. Think safety along those kind of lines. You want to be using doors, baby gates, pens for the dog, crates, anything like that. Obviously be aware that if you are using baby gates, can your dog, or does your dog, jump over them? That's all got to be put into account. But when they say the dog, shouldn't be left with the baby, the dog shouldn't also be able to find the baby. So it's not a case of, oh, baby's on the sofa, I'm just walking out to get a cup of tea and the dog's somewhere. That can't happen either. So I had this myself. I'm trying to think how old Charlie was. So we with 3 dogs at the time. So I was with my parents. So we had the old lab, mental Romanian dog, Flicker, who I didn't trust at all. That was quite scary, actually, seeing her response to the baby. And my greyhound, which is dopey as hell, and I had introduced her to a variety of animals, including rabbits. And after wanting to kill them, she had calmed down. So it'd been a few weeks, and again, this is something that you have to watch out for, getting complacent. And Charlie was on the floor, as in a little kind of chairy thing, but on the floor. And everyone was out of the room because we were getting stuff, and the dogs were loose, and they had come up, sniffed him, and I'd told them, go away. The greyhound, obviously being a greyhound, is not interested in anything unless it's another greyhound, so I wasn't concerned about her anyway. Flicker was constantly on a lead attached to something or in another room, as it was the safety thing. And then Charlie started hiccuping for the first time, and the greyhound just went from 0 to 100, as greyhounds do, and straight into that predatory response. And she zoomed in that room, and I zoomed behind her. And because she's very balanced, and she's I had to go through all this with little dogs and everything. She's very, very balanced. And she stood a foot from him, looking completely alert, like she would if she'd seen a wild rabbit, and just staring at him. And you could see the cogs turning in her brain of, this noise makes me want to kill something, and it reminds me of rabbits, but it's this object, actually, which I'm not meant to do anything with. And she paused and she walked away. But to be honest, if she'd been a different personality or blah blah blah, she could have bitten him then, and that would have been completely my fault. And she had been introduced to loads of animals and things. I mean, that probably had stood her in good stead for that moment. But you can't predict the way that babies' voices and things change. They're changing all the time. Where they're growing, their voice box is changing, right? And the dogs have to get used to this all the time. It's not like, oh, there's the baby. Another thing, which again I'll go into, is when they start crawling. Again, it's completely different from the dog's point of view, and I'll explain why later. But you've got to be aware of just being vigilant until your child is pretty old. I'm talking kind of 5+. You can't really trust what's going to happen, and predict things like that. So a dog should not be showing overly excitement around a baby at all. So this Staffy, this is what he was showing. He just wanted to zoom at the baby and lick its face and couldn't settle. And that not settling thing and slightly whining is not excitement. He just didn't know what to do in this situation. And the only thing really that we could do with him was stick him on a lead and give him something to chew. Or you hand feed him if you want. And that's what the video shows as well. And that's really what you should be doing if you have a stressed dog. We treat it the same way as cat, small animal, and other dog introductions. It's kind of, you manage the situation by the dog being on a lead or in a pen. I prefer a lead because you're very interactive with them. And the dog glances at the baby and then you call them back. So you're constantly getting their attention, asking them to lie down, getting them to chew on something so they get nice and relaxed and they get used to being around the baby and doing nothing. I don't want them around the baby and we're doing kind of high energy introductions, or you're around the baby and you're feeling anxious. If it got too much for him, we'd remove him, which we had to do a lot in the beginning. And they sent me videos later of him getting calmer and calmer. Originally, he couldn't even be in the same room as the baby because I felt he was just too stressed by the situation. And people, and it's kind of, I can see why they thought that. They're just like, show him the baby, show him what it is so he can relax. He doesn't know what it is. But he just wasn't getting to that point, and he's a big boy as well. He's a lovely dog. He's one of my favourite dogs ever, but you can't take the risk. So it's like, right, take him out, calm him down, and we calm them down by sometimes I walk with them, sometimes I play with them, just change the vibe. So we calm them down, and then we introduce, but we introduce slowly. So I'm walking backwards into the room with the dog kind of in front of me, and I'm controlling his footsteps essentially, not with the lead but with my body. So if he tries to push past me, I push him back, and because he's a big dog, I'm properly like pushing him back. Little dogs, that you don't need to do this. You can just kind of just step towards them and they step back. But it's stopping him getting into that bulldozing mentality of, oh, I'm stressed, I need to see what's going on, I don't know what to do. It's like, slow it down. It's like, no, I know you don't know what to do, but I do. And if you look at me, you'll get a treat. And if we go in slowly, you can have treats. And if you go too fast, we're starting again. And if you get too stressed, we're having a break. And that's what we did with him. To be honest, most dogs are not this stressed, but I'm putting it in there just so that you know if you've got one of these situations and it's like, goodness, what do I do? How can I trust the dog? This is what you have to do. It's a very kind of back and forth movement, and the first bit can take quite long. I was there for about half an hour back and forth into the room. But pretty soon it got to a point where he could stay in the room for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes at a time, getting used to the baby whilst being hand fed, and slowly learning to ignore the baby. So the first bit, again, with any dog training, is micro steps, and it does take a long time, but that isn't micro steps forever. It's not like we have to build up each minute he's in the room, and start all over again. It's not really like that. Just the first bit is quite tedious. The next bit you can do in quite large chunks. But the point is, he was on a lead the whole time until he's just disinterested. They should be just bored of the baby, just like they'd be bored if you were like holding a kettle or running around with a house plant. It's like, oh yeah, it's just that thing. Okay, I've got it. And telling him, if he comes over, just shooing him away, and him being able to do that without getting kind of upset or frustrated or scared. It's like, yep, you can come in and you can leave. So you're in control of his movements, basically. But that's what you need to get to. And if you're not there, basically, dog needs to be on a lead. But in the situation, if you just avoid, this is where this Jack Russell situation went wrong, is you can't just avoid and have the baby up high and have the baby in your arms and no dogs at all. You've got to be able to introduce, but you do have to do it safely. You just can't have a loose predator around with a newborn creature. You can't do it. It's too dangerous. Another way that it can go, which was what I found with Flicker, and also my friend's Akita, is this protective thing kicks in, where they protect you from the baby, and I'll explain why. So it usually happens with dogs that are naturally protective anyway, protective, territorial, those kind of words, which Akitas are and Romanian dogs can be, because they're just inherently nervous, so like everything's dangerous to them. But I walked in with with the baby, and Flicker looked at me, and Charlie made like these little Charlie noises, right, which newborns make, and she thought it was me. She thought that Charlie was hurting me, and she came rushing in, and it really scared me because I didn't know what she would do. But I stood up and I just said no, back like a proper, big voice. And then after that, she spent basically months on a lead, because I couldn't trust her, and it made me worried about this situation. And then when I moved out and I moved where I am now, I also spent years where they were segregated all the time, so they were never even running around together, even though he was walking before one. It was only really 2 years old that they started having introductions, because I was just so worried. Also, her history, right? She's quite snappy. She doesn't like anything invading her space. She's very, very scared, and she kind of tells things off with her teeth. And even though she's never hurt anything badly, apart from the rabbits she's killed and eaten, she, I couldn't just risk her biting him, nipping him, whatever, because I thought, she's going to get put down if that happens. So it was more for her benefit as well. But it just meant that all their interactions were, sometimes I'd hold him and she would be there, and he would do his baby thing of kind of punching her gently on the head, and then I'd be like, right, go away, go away, because this situation is making me nervous. I don't know what's going to happen. But she slowly, over a long time, just became very used to him, and she absolutely adores him, and became very, very protective over him, which caused its own problems on walks. But just by doing it slowly and having these little interactions was really good. And we had a baby gate, and the baby gate's good for dogs that are not in that excited, stressed phase, but probably aren't sure, like she is. She always wants to say hello to dogs, but the moment they kind of turn around, she will snap. She likes to say hello where they can't say hello back. So the gate was great for this, because he could be by the gate and she could dive in and out of seeing him and stuff. And then I saw some very sweet behaviour where she started to kind of pat the floor and roll on her back, and she was kind of inviting him to play. Although again, I didn't let this happen because I wasn't sure what kind of play would ensue from a mad Romanian dog and a child. But those are the signs that were really good. And then really it was kind of as he got older and started coming out the pram, and she got to play with him outside, and I've got videos of that, which I don't think I've put anywhere, but they are amazing to watch, and she absolutely adores him. We have to take everything very slowly, and that's okay. It's just making sure that you do take things slowly. I mean, I saw no reason why they would interact. It was like, right, the baby's in this room, you're out, or the baby's in that room, right, you're in this one now. Just constantly, back and forth, and because she doesn't have any separation anxiety or anything like that, she's very movable. Even now, if kids come around the house, the first thing I do is work out where I want the dog. If she knows the children, then I kind of have them all loose. They're all 7, around 7 now. She stays with me anyway. She's not like following them around or anything, but I know that she's going to be fine with them running in and out. If it's kids I don't really know, the first thing I do is I put her somewhere and I say, you can't go in that room. I've got an outbuilding as well, so sometimes if there's a lot of kids, I'll just put her in there and lock the door and hide the key, so there's absolutely no chance of anything happening at all. And she's fine in that. She can just stay in there for the day. It's quite big and stuff, so that's good. So just you've got to do management, a lot of management, as well as the introductions. Most dogs are absolutely fine with kids because they're domestic. They're bred to be okay with kids. It's more of the weirder breeds that you've got to watch. Romanian dogs, a lot of them, they're either very old breeds that have been used for working, so they're domestic, but they're just not in-house domestic, or they're street dogs, which are basically pretty much wild animals. But also a lot of Asian breeds as well. So you've got to just be careful of those. I remember when my best friend Alice, she held Charlie and she had Nikita. Again, same thing happened. I saw her face on Flicker's face where Charlie made a noise and Nikita started to jump up, and she wanted to jump up and see, was this creature hurting, her owner, who she absolutely adored. But because Alice is on it and exceptional with dogs, she was like, no, and Nikita just sat. But she sat alert. I wasn't comfortable with this, because she's kind of ready to spring at any moment. Do I need to defend against this thing? And those are the kind of things where really it's like, right, dog on a lead until the dog gets used to that this is part of the family. Dog can't touch it, which dogs learn. They're quite good at that. It's like, right, you said not touch it, I won't touch it. As long as you do it properly, they're fine with that. They've got to learn that it's not a threat, it's part of the family, and things like that. On to the next stage. This is more where it goes wrong than the other things, because again, people have got complacent. It's more when the child is moving, like walking, so kind of around the age of 2. Now, most people, this is where people will say, oh, the dog just snapped. Like, oh, the dog and the child have been in the dog's bed all its life. The dog drinks its milk next to the child. All of that shouldn't be happening anyway. The dog needs to have its safe space where the child shouldn't go. It is very difficult to enforce. Charlie himself, he loves seeing the dog in her bed, and I'm like, don't touch her when she's in the bed. She's fine with this. Fine as in she won't do anything. She's not fine as in she does wail, like she kind of licks her lips and rolls backwards, on her back, which is her way of saying, you're really stressing me out, don't hurt me. It doesn't take a lot to stress her out though. But yeah, that should be a very definite, the dog's there, don't go near. But what happens is when the dogs, they're kind of tolerant up to a point, and it's just been missed by most people. So with puppies, right, they're very, very tolerant of the puppies. They where they've come from wolves. They're still 99% wolf. They have a lot of wolfy traits, even though they're not wolves. They're less intelligent, they're more domestic, blah, blah, blah. But this is what happens in wolf society. The pups are very young, and everyone's very, very tolerant. They get a nanny to look after them, first of all, so the adults don't have that much playtime to do with them. It's kind of like beneath them. But they get to chew on them and, bite them, and it's painful and stuff like that. And then what happens is, around the age of kind of between 4 and 6 months, it all stops. Suddenly there's boundaries. Suddenly it's like, no, that hurt. I mean, it could be just the size of the pups, like that nip I can tolerate that, and now I can't because your head's bigger. But it does happen. And our children grow insanely slowly compared to dogs. So from a dog's point of view, they're just disciplining the child like they would a puppy, and it's completely normal. The only thing that's not normal from a dog's point of view is that why is the child not picking up these cues that another dog would? I've stared at the child, or I've even looked away from the child, or licked my lips, or done wail, or gone a bit stiff, and the child hasn't noticed because it's a human, not a dog, and then the dog needs to back it up. I feel I need to back this up, and that really depends on the personality of the dog. A lot of dogs will move away, which is ideally what you want. You want them to go, right, I'll move away, and then it's your job to stop the child, stop moving after the dog. That's the way of the dog saying no, and now I need to enforce that. Some dogs don't. They just don't feel it's their right. Why should I move away? Actually, I'm going to make you move away. Because in the dog world, that's what would happen. You'd have some personalities that hold their ground, and if you hold your ground, you've got to do something. You don't hold your ground just by being peaceful, do you? You hold your ground with teeth and noise. And some dogs would just think, oh, I can't be bothered with this, I'm moving off. So that depends. It depends on the breed and personality of what you've got. But this is, people are still thinking tiny baby, because in our world they are 2 years old. You've kind of got the equivalent of like a 3 or 4 week puppy, really. But in the dog's head, it's like 2 years old is way into adulthood for dogs. So they've usually been very patient and very tolerant up to this point, and then they've just had enough. It's like, you should know better. They don't realise this. They're never going to realise this. And this is what you've got to understand. Also, toddlers, they tend to obviously move in a strange way. That you can use the dog for balance. They fall over a lot, which could be on the dog. Dogs don't understand this. This doesn't happen with dogs. They don't just do that. And you'll find that if you do have a disabled dog and things like that, they'll probably get attacked more. Blind or moving weirdly, 3 legs, that kind of thing. I know Flicker herself, if she has encounters with 3-legged dogs, make her extremely nervous because of that jerky movement. She doesn't understand it, and I have to really keep her away because she'll just attack. That's just her nature. And it's the same thing with a toddler. They don't get this kind of clumsy behaviour. It seems rude to them. It's rude in the dog world to impose on space. It's not necessarily a cuddle or affection. It's kind of like, I'm here, I want to be here. And that's how they're seeing the child. Like, who taught you to be this rude type of thing, is what's going on. So it's really important to watch these toddling steps, and like I said, up to the age of 5, where the child's got a bit more comprehension and the dog really has got used to them. But where again they don't generalise, the child's going through all this movement stuff, all this different, like every stage is different, right? You got crawling, toddling, walking, running, and all the different noises as well. And the dog's got to tolerate all of this. And it's just about being aware, not to just expect too much. I'm not saying expect aggression per se. I'm saying expect that you've got a predator and you've brought a baby rabbit into the house. That's what you should expect. That's what you're going with, and then you get fed information all the time. But be aware, just because you've got this information of the age of, like, you've got a 1-year-old baby, it doesn't mean that it's going to be the same information that the dog's going to present when the baby's 2, 3, 4. It's going to change quite a lot. Also, height's quite important in the dog world. So the taller the child gets, the more likely they are to take them seriously anyway. Whereas small one, it's kind of seen as lesser in their eyes. Whoever's getting up higher has got more kind of kudos points. But also their eye contact with the child and the dog is very same level, and it's quite threatening. So you've just got to watch out for that. Dogs don't give each other eye contact where they can help it. It's only if they're quite serious about something with intent. They usually just glance, like a glance, flitting back. Where humans are very, unless you're autistic like I am, they're very kind of into eye contact. And again, dogs can find that threatening. They don't particularly like it. You need to establish something as well where the dog doesn't see the kind of child as an equal or part of the dogs, which can happen if the child's always running around. The adults are always standing around, if you like, and the dog's allowed on the sofa, the kids allowed on the sofa. These kind of things blur the lines, and it can allow the dog to think, I need to discipline this child because it's part of my realm rather than our realm, which shouldn't be. You need a bit of a clear boundary for that. It just helps. Things like that just help. But yeah, it's just about being safe, really, and really reading the signs of the dog. You should be watching things that look like a dog's calm, a bit like when this Staffy Cross was stressed, right? He looked friendly because he's wagging his tail. He wants to see the baby. His ears are back, so it kind of looks friendly, but he's actually pacing, whining, won't settle, constantly wants to see the baby. That's odd. That's stress. And a dog that's being stroked and being still and stroked and it seems quite soft, can look like they're enjoying it, but actually, are they flicking their tongue out? Are you seeing the whites of their eyes? Have they got their mouth closed, or are they kind of just panting slightly with their eyes half shut? There's a difference, and they're very, very subtle. Dogs pick it up, but we don't. So just be aware that, I did let Charlie kind of stroke her, and he was fairly rough and things like that. But she tolerated it but didn't like it, and I kept it at a very minimum, as in, stick your hand out and then bring it back in, because I can see her subtle signs of being stressed, which may look like, oh, she's enjoying it because she's just still, where she could walk away. But actually the fact that her eyes are, like on stalks almost, and she's licking her lips occasionally, even though she could move away and she doesn't, means that she's finding this stressful. And you don't want that association either. So it's not like every time we're together with the child, it's stressful. It shouldn't be like that at all. It should just be, minimal stress, and really enjoyment and things like that. I mean, when they get older, they can do in the training in the food. I always think that's quite good. They should be, even though you don't really want begging, but it's very good for children to kind of throw food and things like that. It builds a much better bond, if you like. So where the baby's eating at the table in their little chairs, their messy chairs, and throwing food everywhere. Dogs are very useful for that anyway, right? But that also builds that rapport of, oh, it's positive. This creature's positive because I get food, and then it just turns to this creature's positive. So you kind of cut out the middleman. So food, it's always good. Food's always good. Where to do it. As far as kind of dogs eating and things like that, some people do the whole, putting their hands in their food and things like that. I don't really agree with that. I definitely don't agree with the child doing that. If you are concerned about any resource guarding, it should be adults only that get rid of that problem. And as far as guarding, the kids shouldn't be, a bit like in the bed, the kids shouldn't be near the dog and the food bowl. It just shouldn't happen. But to kind of build trust, what you would do, and again, I wouldn't do this with a child, but adults you can do it, is when the dog is eating, you can approach the dog and flick extra food in. So basically the dog gets to see your approach as positive. A bit like seeing the baby is positive because he drops loads of food. Seeing your approach to the food bowl or the bone should also be positive, because it's like, yeah, just have a bit of extra chicken. And these just happen quite naturally in my life anyway, because I always give the dog scraps and it's always in their bowl. So it's like, right, here's a bit, and then I'll go up, maybe get some more scraps, and then refill. So it's like, you know, so she's already eating and she knows I'm giving her more. I'm not going to kind of steal it or do nothing. It's a very kind of positive interaction. So just getting these things established is key, really. But yeah, just go with the whole safety first, watch for behaviour, even if it's subtle, you've got to really read into it.
If you're interested in more videos or stuff that I do, I am on TikTok. I usually put my TikTok videos also on Facebook and Instagram, so just search Fawn Dog for those. And the main website is fawndog1to1dogtraining.co.uk. Thanks for listening, guys.